Hi there. In this short video I want to talk to you about how to use the histogram to check the exposure of your image, how to read the histogram and know what sort of histogram you should be looking for depending on the image that you're taking, and also whether you've overexposed or underexposed your image so much so that you're not going to be able to rescue it when you come to editing, and also how far can you push the brightness or darkness of your image and know that you've not accidentally strayed into overexposure. So don't judge me on these pictures. I've literally just run out into the garden now on a bright sunny day to take some images and then show you how to read the histogram for them. So this image, a pretty straightforward image of our washing on the line. As I said, very bright conditions and potential for overexposure in this image. Now I'm on my normal review of image mode here, but if I press display, and for most of you it will be a button called display or info, for you to have a look a little bit closer at the camera settings that were used. So if we take a look at this particular image, very bright and sunny out today, so my ISO was 125 for the sunny conditions. I had my f-stop at f2 very wide open to blur the background so that you can't see anybody's smalls in the background there, and then consequently the shutter speed is 1/4000 because we've got a very bright day, very wide aperture. Okay, so I'm shooting in aperture priority for the purposes of this video. So if we want to go one step further and look at more information, if I press display again on my particular camera, which is the Sony A7 Mark II, I then get a smaller frame of my image. I get the same data but a little bit extra as well, telling me other things about what settings I used, and then I start to see the histogram. Now for the moment, ignore the coloured ones down there and just look at the white one. And you'll also see here that I'd not dialed in any exposure compensation, so I shot this at 0, okay? Now, can you see, I hope you can see on this video that we've got flashing areas up here on our highlights over there, and up here on the peg and along the white areas on that garment there. We've got some flashing white areas. Now, that's because I've got my highlights enabled. Now, I've just searched all over this camera to see whether I can switch them off and switch them on, and it looks like they're automatically on all the time. But on some cameras you'll have to go into your menu and press find highlights and press enable to make them flash like this, the highlight warning. So on a Nikon you have to go into something like info display when you're in your playback menu, and you'll find you have to go in and tick the various options that you want. So you might have to tick to show the camera data, the highlights and the histogram. They might not automatically be on when you press your review button, your display button here. On a Nikon, I do believe actually that once you're in review mode like this, on some of the entry-level models, you actually just press the top of the dial here, just press the top of it where mine says display but yours may not say anything, and you will get the info displaying if you've enabled it in the menu. Okay, sorry if that all sounded a bit complicated. Canon will be different again, but best thing to do is Google your model and say Canon 1200D how to enable highlights. Okay, and the same for any other camera models as well. So as I said, if we press the info button again on my particular camera, or the display button, we get our histogram and we get more information. So the histogram, basically, if we just look at the top little one there, it records the tones of light in your image from black, jet black, solid black on the left-hand side through to pure white on the right-hand side. So you almost have to imagine that your image is in black and white, and imagine how much black there is, how much white, and how much shades of grey in between, going from black, dark grey, slightly lighter grey, through to mid grey, through to lighter grey, through to sort of dirty grey white, through to pure white at the very end. Okay, And you would expect on an average scene like this for your histogram to be somewhat of a mountain range, and it is, and each histogram will look very different. So that little peak there of black is probably this black area here on the image. Just wait while I wake it up again. Oops. There we go. And then all the midtones and everything, the blue sky, the brick wall, everything else are recorded along the middle here. And then anything white is recorded along the edge there. Now what's interesting with this is if you have overexposed areas, your histogram will show a peak going off up the right hand side and shooting off the top of the graph. And I've taken one in a moment where you'll be able to see that. And the other thing that alerts you to the fact that you may have overexposed the image is these flashing areas. So this image here is telling me that I've got some overexposed areas, but the histogram, which is more accurate, is telling me I haven't. Okay, so it's always important. This is a bit sensitive, this particular mechanism, the highlights flashing, whereas this is accurate. So you can sometimes have quite a lot flashing on this area, warning you that you may have overexposed exposed highlights, but the fact that the histogram is not showing a vastly overexposed area is reassuring, because basically it means no, it isn't overexposed. Okay, so let's just flip on to another image where I think I've brightened it. Let's look at our display information. So yeah, I've brightened by plus 0.7 with the exposure compensation, and you can see now that more of it is flashing. And if we look back at the previous image, the whole histogram has moved slightly over to the right. Okay, and the black peak has gone down a little bit because it's lightened everywhere on the image, so the histogram has moved to the right, and it's alerting me that I may have overexposed those areas. But when I look at the histogram, I've not quite yet gone into the danger area of literally overexposing them. Now I'm shooting raw files here, and I know that if I have overexposed some flashy areas here, but that they're not overexposed in my histogram, I can rescue a certain level of detail in those flashing areas when I edit my raw file. If you're shooting a JPEG file, I would be very careful about how much is flashing in on your image here, and not go too far, because you haven't got the same ability to rescue the highlights as you have with a raw image. So let's move on one more, where now I've gone up to plus 1.7 and it's really flashing quite a lot bigger areas, but interestingly it's not shot off up the right hand side yet. Now I'd be starting to get a bit worried about this if I reviewed this and you know, all this was flashing. I think I'd be going back and saying, no, actually I want to shoot it more like that or that. Okay. And see what's happening to the blue sky there. That's starting to become a bleached out, whereas I would actually prefer my blue sky to be somewhere like that. And then I would lighten this area in shade a little bit potentially when I edit. So let's move on one further. Okay, completely different image now. Again, let me just press display so you can see it. Purposely overexpose this image in bright sunshine. Let's press display again, and you can see I'm on plus 1.7. Areas flashing, but although it's all quite sort of, you know, the histogram's quite flat actually, because there's, well, it's recording that the tones are all pretty much even in the image, although that's flashing to tell me it's overexposed, but this isn't. Okay, so just exercise that little bit of caution. And then let's go over here. Right, this is where I've gone right up to plus 3 here to prove a point. We've got vast areas flashing here, and can you see how that's shot up off the edge there? Quite a lot of the graph has shot up off the edge there. So that's a clear warning that that image has overexposed areas with details that we cannot rescue when we edit. Okay. And then here I was just messing about to see what would happen, because we've got a bright sky behind a shadow area here. I wanted to see how far I could push before this sky really went overexposed. So if I wanted to keep this area here quite bright, see there are my smalls in that picture, probably not so small as well. But if I wanted to keep this area bright and not completely overexpose it in order to get that brighter, how far could I go? So, oh, in fact, there we go. I've gone down -1 to see the impact, and the graph should have moved. Very slight move, not massively. Okay, because I think it's reading so much of the sky as well. Okay, let's flip through those because they're probably not quite as helpful. Oh, well, here we go. Look, +1 to brighten this has meant that I've lost the sky, and that has shot straight off up the top. So I've overexposed an area of the sky, probably right where it's more solid black is overexposed. So that wouldn't be great. I've managed to get this to look brighter versus the previous shots, but I've lost my sky. So I wouldn't go that far, and I'd lighten this later in editing. Okay. And then on to the final example, we've got a little metal garden ornament here, a dragonfly, and I've shot it at 0.7, and we've got a nice even histogram. I very rarely shoot at naught, actually. I'm always messing about, looking at the picture in the viewfinder and deciding if I like it, and then dialing up or down with the exposure. So next example, gone down to -1, and can you see, and if we just have a quick look at that image, it's much darker than the previous one, and the histogram has changed quite a bit as well. It's shifted over to the left to reflect that it's a darker image. Okay, -2, really going over to the left. I wouldn't expect a daytime image to be that far left. Might expect an evening one to be. And then -3, really going off left. And again, if we see a spike that's gone straight off up the top there, that means we've got shadows that are so underexposed, there's no detail there, and they can't be rescued. Okay, and I don't think there are any other, potentially, just more or less staying the same still. We've underexposed by -1. That's looking a bit dull, isn't it? It's not looking like a clean white wall. Okay, then brightening it. Look at the histogram, starting to flash, moving more over to the right-hand side, but not shooting off up the top. And then we go to +2, lots more flashing and almost disappearing off up the top. And 2.7, very, very overexposed in these areas, and it has shot off up the top. So that's as far as you could go to brighten that image, but I probably wouldn't go that far. I'd probably stick more at about that. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. If you've got any questions, please post them, and I'll try and answer them for you. Thank you.